I didn't mean to notice Emmanuel the way I did. That's probably the worst part of this whole thing. It wasn't some sudden, dramatic moment. It was gradual, quiet, the kind of thing you don't realize is happening until it's already too late to stop it. It started the summer I basically lived at my best friend's house. His name's Lucas, and we'd been close since high school. By the time we hit college, his place just became easier. Closer to campus, less noise than my apartment, better food. And yeah, his dad, Emmanuel, was always around, but he'd always just been background noise. The cool dad type. Friendly, a little sarcastic, the kind of guy who'd toss you a beer and ask about your life like he actually meant it. At least, that's how it used to be. The first time something felt off, I remember it way too clearly. It was a stupidly hot afternoon, the kind where the air feels heavy and everything sticks to your skin. Lucas had gone out with his girlfriend, leaving me behind because I looked dead and needed rest. Honestly, I didn't argue. I'd barely slept the night before. So I was alone in the house, or at least I thought I was. I'd just come back inside after sitting on the back porch for a while, trying to catch a breeze that didn't exist. I was halfway down the hallway when I heard water running, shower, I assumed, and didn't think much of it. Until Emmanuel walked out. Towel around his waist. Hair still wet. No shirt. And yeah, I know how that sounds. It shouldn't have been a big deal. He lived there. I was the guest. But something about that moment just stuck. He didn't seem surprised to see me. Just paused slightly, like he was recalibrating. "Didn't know you were still here, Colin," he said, casually rubbing a towel through his hair. His voice was always like that, steady, a little deeper than expected. Calm in a way that made you pay attention. "Yeah," I replied, trying not to stare, and failing a little. "Lucas left like an hour ago." He nodded, stepping closer down the hallway, completely unbothered by the fact that he was barely dressed. "Figures. Kid never sits still." There was a brief silence. Not awkward exactly, but not normal either. I became way too aware of everything. The faint scent of his shampoo, the water still tracing down his chest, the way he looked at me, not long, not intense, just present. "You all right?" he asked. I blinked. "Yeah." "Why?" He shrugged slightly. "You look like you're thinking too hard." I let out a small laugh, mostly to break whatever that moment was. "Just tired." He hummed, like he didn't fully buy it. And then he walked past me. That should have been the end of it. But it wasn't. Because as he passed, his hand brushed my shoulder. Light. Probably accidental. Barely even there. Except it didn't feel accidental. And I hated that my body reacted to it. That night, I told myself I was overthinking everything. It was nothing. Just proximity, heat, boredom, whatever excuse made it easier to ignore. But once something like that gets in your head, it doesn't just leave. Over the next few days, I started noticing things I hadn't before. The way Emmanuel moved around the house, comfortable, grounded. The way he'd look at me when we talked, like he was actually listening instead of just waiting for his turn to speak. And yeah, the way he looked. I hadn't let myself think about that before. Not really. But now it was harder to ignore. He wasn't just my friend's dad anymore. He was a man. A very real, very present man who just happened to exist way too close to me. One evening it got worse. Lucas had dragged me into one of his usual late-night gaming sessions, but halfway through, he got a call and stepped outside. I stayed on the couch, controller in hand, not really playing anymore. That's when Emmanuel came in. "You two still at it?" he asked, leaning against the doorway. "Yeah," I said, glancing back. "Well, he is. I'm just here." He smirked slightly and walked in, grabbing a beer from the fridge. "You always this bad, or is this a special occasion?" "Wow," I scoffed. "Didn't know you were keeping score." "I observe," he replied, sitting down on the opposite end of the couch. There it was again, that easy tone, Like everything he said had something just under the surface. We talked for a bit. Nothing serious. Just random stuff, college, work, life. But it didn't feel like small talk. At some point, I realized I'd completely forgotten about the game. And then Lucas still hadn't come back. It was just me and Emmanuel. The room felt quieter than it should have been. "You can relax, you know," he said after a while, glancing at me. "You look tense again." "I'm not tense," I said a little too quickly. He raised an eyebrow. Didn't argue. Just took a sip of his beer. That somehow made it worse. I shifted slightly, trying to get comfortable, but it only made me more aware of how close we actually were. Then he leaned forward a bit, resting his forearms on his knees, looking at me more directly. "You've changed since I first met you," he said. That caught me off guard. "What do you mean?" He held my gaze for a second longer than necessary. "You're not a kid anymore, Colin." Something about the way he said it made my chest tighten. I didn't know what to say to that. And honestly, I wasn't sure I wanted to. Because for the first time, I had this feeling, quiet, but undeniable, that whatever was happening between us, it wasn't just in my head. And that scared me more than I wanted to admit. I tried to put some distance between us after that night. Not in an obvious way. I still stayed over, still hung out with Lucas, still acted normal. But internally, something had shifted, and I knew it. It was like I'd crossed some invisible line just by noticing Emmanuel the way I had. And once you see something like that, you can't really unsee it. The problem was, he didn't act like anything was wrong. If anything, he acted the same. Maybe even more relaxed around me. Which somehow made it worse, because I couldn't tell if I'd imagined that tension or if he just wasn't acknowledging it. A few days later, it hit another level. Lucas had convinced me to come with him to the gym in the morning, something I immediately regretted the second my alarm went off. By the time we got back, I was exhausted, sweaty, and ready to pass out. Lucas, of course, had other plans. "Shower's all yours," he said, tossing his bag down. "I'm heading out again." "Again?" I groaned. "Yeah, Lauren's off early today." Of course she was. He disappeared upstairs before I could even respond, leaving me alone in the living room, still catching my breath. I grabbed a bottle of water from the kitchen, leaned against the counter, and tried to wake myself up. That's when Emmanuel walked in. "You look like you're about to collapse," he said, grabbing a mug from the cabinet. "Feel like it too," I muttered. He chuckled softly, pouring himself coffee. "Lucas push you too hard? He thinks he's a personal trainer now." "That's new," he said, amused. There was something easy about moments like this. Too easy. Like we slipped into conversation without effort, without thinking. And every time it happened, I felt that same quiet pull underneath it. I took another sip of water, trying to ignore it. "You should stretch," he added, leaning back against the counter across from me. "You're gonna feel that tomorrow." "I already feel it," I said. He smirked slightly. "That's because you don't take care of yourself properly." "Oh, and you do?" "Better than you," he shot back, calm as ever. I rolled my eyes, but I was smiling. "All right, coach." There was a brief pause. Then he stepped closer. "Here," he said, gesturing lightly. "Turn around." I frowned. "What?" "Your shoulders," he clarified. "You're stiff." "I'm fine." "Colin." The way he said my name stopped me. Not forceful. Not demanding. Just certain. And before I could overthink it, I turned around. Big mistake. The second his hand settled on my shoulders, everything in my body tensed for a completely different reason. His touch wasn't rough or overly familiar, it was firm, controlled. Like he knew exactly what he was doing. His thumbs pressed in slowly, working into the tension like he'd done this 100 times before. I exhaled without meaning to. "See?" he said quietly. "Told you." I didn't respond. Because I couldn't. My brain had basically short-circuited. All I could focus on was the feeling of his hands, steady, deliberate, way too grounding. It wasn't just physical. It was the awareness behind it. The fact that he was the one doing it. You hold stress here, he added, voice lower now, closer than before. I swallowed. Yeah, I guess. His hands moved slightly, pressing deeper this time, and I had to bite back a reaction. This wasn't normal. None of this was normal. But I wasn't stopping him either. That was the part that messed with me the most. You need to relax more, he said. I let out a quiet laugh, mostly to keep myself grounded. Easier said than done? Not really, he replied. There was a slight pause. Then his hands slowed. Didn't leave, just rested there for a second longer than necessary. And that's when it shifted again. That same feeling from before. That quiet, heavy tension that didn't need words to exist. I turned my head slightly, just enough to glance back at him. Bad idea. Because he was already looking at me. Not surprised. Not caught off guard. Just steady. Aware. For a second, either of us moved. And I swear, everything around us just disappeared. You should go shower, he said finally, voice calm, but softer than before. It felt like a reset button. I stepped away almost too quickly. Yeah, I should. I didn't look at him again as I walked out. Didn't trust myself to. The shower didn't help. If anything, it made it worse. Because standing there, water running over me, all I could think about was how easily that moment had happened. How natural it felt. How either of us had stopped it. And the worst part? I didn't want to stop it. That realization sat heavy in my chest. Because this wasn't just some harmless crush anymore. This was something else. Something real. And if I wasn't careful, it was going to turn into something I couldn't take back. After that morning, I told myself I needed to get a grip. Whatever was happening, it wasn't sustainable. It wasn't smart. And it definitely wasn't harmless anymore. This wasn't just me overthinking small moments. This was something building, something neither of us was really stopping. So yeah. I tried to pull back. Spent less time at Lucas's place. Made excuses. Said I had assignments, work, anything to keep a little distance. And for a couple days, it actually worked. Too well, maybe? Because the space didn't make things clearer, it just made me think about him more. Every little interaction replayed in my head. The way he said my name. The way he looked at me like he already knew what I was thinking. That moment in the kitchen, his hands on me, the way either of us moved away right away. It didn't feel like nothing. And I couldn't convince myself it was. By the end of the week, Lucas texted me. Dude, are you alive or what? I stared at the message longer than I should have. Then I replied. Yeah, just busy. I'll come by later. I shouldn't have. I knew that before I even got there. But something in me wanted to test it. To see if maybe it had all just been timing. Circumstance. Something I could control if I just acted normal. It wasn't. Lucas wasn't even home when I arrived. His car was gone, but I figured he'd be back soon, so I let myself in like usual. The house was quiet, familiar in that almost too comfortable way. I dropped my bag by the couch, already debating whether I should just leave. Then I heard a voice behind me. Thought that was you. I froze for half a second before turning around. Emmanuel. Of course. He was standing near the hallway, sleeves rolled up, like I'd just interrupted whatever he'd been doing. But his attention was fully on me now. You've been avoiding us, he added. Straight to it. I haven't been avoiding anyone, I said, a little too quick again. He tilted his head slightly, like he was measuring that response. No? I shrugged, trying to keep it casual. Just had stuff going on. That sound again. Not agreeing. Not arguing. Just not convinced. A quiet tension settled in almost immediately. It wasn't uncomfortable exactly, but it wasn't easy either. It felt like we were both aware of something sitting just under the surface, waiting. Lucas isn't here, he said after a moment. Yeah, I figured. Silence. Then, for some reason, I didn't leave. I walked further into the living room instead, like I always did, like everything was normal. He followed. Not close enough to crowd me, but close enough that I could feel it. You gonna tell me what's going on? He asked. I let out a small breath, running a hand through my hair. Nothing's going on. Colin. There it was again. That tone. Steady. Certain. Like he wasn't asking anymore. I turned to face him fully this time. You're reading into it, I said. I've just been busy. He watched me for a second, quiet, unreadable. Then he stepped closer. Not fast. Not aggressive. Just deliberate. Busy enough to disappear? He asked. My chest tightened slightly. Why do you care? I shot back before I could stop myself. The second it left my mouth, I knew I'd crossed into something different. But he didn't react the way I expected. If anything, he got calmer. That's a fair question, he said. Another step closer. Now there wasn't much space between us. Maybe I noticed, he continued, voice lower now, that something changed. I didn't respond. Because he was right. And we both knew it. You felt it too, he added, not as a question this time. That hit harder than anything else. I swallowed, my gaze dropping for a second before I forced myself to look back at him. You're Lucas's dad, I said quietly. It wasn't really an answer. But it was the truth that mattered. Something flickered in his expression, not surprise, not denial. Just acknowledgement. I know exactly who I am, he said. The way he said it made my pulse spike. And you think I don't? I pushed back, even though my voice wasn't as steady as I wanted it to be. He didn't answer right away. Instead, his gaze dropped briefly, just for a second, before returning to mine. And that second? It said more than anything else. Because it wasn't random. It wasn't casual. It was intentional. You keep trying to pretend this is nothing, he said. I let out a quiet, frustrated breath. Because it should be nothing. Another pause. Then softer. And is it? That question just sat there. Heavy. Honest. I didn't have a good answer. Because no matter how much I wanted to say yes, it didn't feel like nothing. Not even close. The silence stretched between us, thick and charged. And for a second, I thought one of us would step back. Laugh it off. Break whatever this was before it went any further. But neither of us moved. And that was the problem. Because the longer we stood there like that, the harder it became to pretend we didn't both want to close that distance. I don't know who moved first. That's the only honest answer I can give. 1 second we were just standing there, too close, saying things we probably shouldn't have been saying, and the next, that space between us didn't exist anymore. It wasn't rushed. That's what stuck with me. It was slow. Careful. Like we both knew exactly what we were doing, and exactly how far we shouldn't go. But we didn't stop. His hand came up first, brushing lightly against my arm. Not grabbing, not pulling, just there. Testing. I could have stepped back. I didn't. And I think that told him everything he needed to know. My heart was pounding so loud I was sure he could hear it, but outwardly, everything felt quiet. Focused. Like the rest of the world had dropped away, and it was just this moment. Just him. You're still thinking too much, he murmured. I let out a shaky breath. Yeah, probably. His hand shifted slightly, fingers pressing just enough to ground me. Then stop, he said. Easier said than done. But standing there, with him this close, it suddenly felt a lot harder to hold on to all the reasons this was a bad idea. Lucas. That should have been enough. But it wasn't. Because this didn't feel careless. It didn't feel like some reckless mistake waiting to happen. It felt real. And that was worse. You sure about this? He asked quietly. That was the moment. The out. The chance to walk away before anything actually happened. I should have taken it. Instead, I nodded. Barely. But enough. And something in his expression shifted. Not relief. Not victory. Just acceptance. Like he'd already made peace with whatever this was going to become. His hand moved from my arm to my jaw steady, giving me more than enough time to pull away if I wanted to. I didn't. And when he leaned in, it wasn't sudden or overwhelming. It was controlled. Intentional. The kind of moment that builds instead of crashes. The first contact was light. Almost hesitant. Like we were both still waiting for the other to change their mind. But when neither of us did, it deepened. Not in a way that felt rushed or out of control. Just certain. Like we'd crossed something we couldn't uncross, and there was no point pretending otherwise. My hand found his shirt without me even thinking about it, gripping slightly just to keep myself steady. Because yeah, I needed it. Everything about this felt heavier than I expected. Not just physical. Emotional. The kind of weight that settles in your chest and doesn't leave. When we finally pulled back, it wasn't abrupt. It was slow. Like neither of us was completely ready to let go. I exhaled, trying to process what had just happened. That shouldn't have happened, I said, even though my voice didn't fully match the words. He watched me for a second. You don't sound very convinced, he replied. I let out a quiet, almost frustrated laugh, running a hand through my hair. I'm not. There it was. The truth. Out in the open. Neither of us tried to take it back. Neither of us pretended it didn't mean something. And that was the part that made it dangerous. Because this wasn't just a moment anymore. This was something we'd both chosen. And once you make that kind of choice, there's no going back to how things were before. The sound of a car pulling into the driveway snapped everything back into place. We both froze. Reality hitting all at once. Lucas. I stepped back immediately, like the space between us suddenly mattered again. Emmanuel didn't move as quickly, but when he did, it was just as deliberate as everything else he'd done. Go, he said quietly. I didn't argue. Didn't say anything at all. I just grabbed my bag and moved toward the door, my mind still spinning, heart still racing. I barely made it out before Lucas walked in. Yo, you just got here? He asked, completely unaware. I forced a normal expression. Yeah, just stopped by real quick. I've gotta head out though. He frowned. Dude, you just got here. Yeah, I know. I forgot I had something to finish. It was a weak excuse. But he didn't question it too much. Alright, text me later? Yeah. I will. I didn't look back as I left. Didn't trust myself to. Because I already knew. That wasn't the end of it. Not even close. I didn't go back for 3 days. Not because I was busy. Not because I had anything better to do. But because I knew if I saw him again too soon, I wouldn't be able to pretend that what happened didn't matter. And it mattered. Way more than I wanted it to. I tried to distract myself, classes, work, even going out one night, but none of it really stuck. My head kept circling back to that moment in the living room. The way it felt. The way it didn't feel like a mistake, no matter how many times I told myself it was. That was the problem. If it had felt wrong, I could have shut it down. But it didn't. And now I had to deal with that. Lucas texted me again on the 3rd day. Bro, you disappeared again. You good? I stared at the message for a while before replying. Yeah. I'll come by later. Same words as before. Same mistake. Except this time, I knew exactly what I was walking into. When I got there, Lucas was home. Which should have made things easier. And in a way it did. We fell into our usual routine. TV, random conversations, him complaining about something his girlfriend said. It was normal. Comfortably normal. Almost enough to make me forget. Almost. Until I saw Emmanuel again. He walked in halfway through whatever show we weren't really watching, greeting us like nothing had changed. And that was the weirdest part. Because on the surface, nothing had. But underneath, everything had. "Thought you vanished," he said casually, glancing at me. I forced a small smirk. "Just busy." That word again. This time, he didn't question it. Didn't push. Just nodded slightly and moved on. But there was a look. Quick. Subtle. Just enough to remind me that he hadn't forgotten either. The rest of the evening passed like that, normal on the outside, tense underneath. Every time we were in the same room, I could feel it. That quiet awareness. That pull. And I hated how easy it was to slip back into it. At some point, Lucas got a call and stepped outside again. Of course he did. It was like the universe had a sense of humor. The second the door closed, the air shifted. Not dramatically. Just enough. I stayed where I was on the couch, pretending to focus on the TV. I heard Emmanuel move in the kitchen behind me. "You're doing it again." I closed my eyes briefly. "Doing what?" "Avoiding." I let out a slow breath before turning slightly to look at him. "I'm literally sitting right here." "That's not what I mean." Of course it wasn't. I leaned back against the couch, running a hand through my hair. "What do you want me to say?" "The truth," he said simply. I let out a quiet, humorless laugh. "You really think that's a good idea?" He didn't answer right away. Just walked closer. And stopped a few feet in front of me. "I think pretending this didn't happen is worse," he said. I looked up at him. Really looked this time. "You think I don't know that?" I replied. Because I did. That was the problem. We were both fully aware of what this was. And neither of us was stopping it. "That doesn't mean we should keep going," I added, even though my voice didn't carry much conviction. He studied me for a second. "Then why are you here?" That hit harder than I expected. Because I didn't have a clean answer. "I came to see Lucas," I said. It wasn't a lie. But it wasn't the whole truth either. "Is that all?" he asked. I hesitated. And that hesitation said everything. He exhaled quietly, shaking his head just slightly, not in frustration, more like acknowledgement. "Colin." The way he said my name this time wasn't steady like before. It was softer. And that somehow made it worse. "I'm trying to do the right thing," I said. "I know," he replied. "Then don't make this harder." "I'm not the one making it hard." That wasn't fair. But it also wasn't wrong. The tension settled back in, heavier this time. Less uncertain. More real. I stood up, needing space, even though I knew it wouldn't fix anything. "This can't happen again," I said more firmly now. He didn't move. Didn't argue. Just looked at me. "Can it?" I added. That question hung there. Because now it wasn't just about what we should do. It was about what we actually would do. And deep down, I think we both already knew the answer. I should have left after saying that. This can't happen again. That should have been the end of it. Clean. Final. Something we both stuck to, no matter how complicated it felt. But instead I stayed. And that was the first sign I didn't actually mean it the way I wanted to. Emmanuel didn't argue with me. That was the thing. He didn't push, didn't try to convince me otherwise. He just accepted what I said on the surface. Which somehow made it worse. Because it meant the choice was sitting entirely on me. Lucas came back in a few minutes later, completely unaware of anything that had just happened. He dropped onto the couch next to me, immediately launching into some story about his girlfriend, and I nodded along, pretending I was listening. But I wasn't. Not really. I could feel Emmanuel's presence across the room without even looking at him. It was subtle, but constant, like my body had tuned into him whether I wanted it to or not. That night dragged. Every second felt stretched out, heavy with things left unsaid. Eventually, I made an excuse to leave again. "Man, you've been dipping early a lot lately," Lucas said, frowning slightly. Yeah. Just a lot going on, I replied. He studied me for a second, like he was trying to figure out if there was more to it. You good though? He asked. That question hit harder than it should have. Yeah, I said after a beat. I'm good. It wasn't entirely true, but it was close enough. I didn't look at Emmanuel when I left this time either. Didn't trust what I'd see if I did. The next few days were worse than before. Because now it wasn't just tension. It was something deeper. I started noticing how much I thought about him when he wasn't around. Not just the moments we'd had, but the way he spoke, the way he carried himself, the way he seemed to understand things without needing them spelled out. It wasn't just physical anymore. And that realization made everything more complicated. I tried to focus on normal life. Classes, work, anything that kept my head occupied. It didn't last. Because one night my phone buzzed. And when I looked at it, it wasn't Lucas. It was Emmanuel. I stared at the screen longer than I should have. We never texted before. Not directly. Which meant this wasn't accidental. The message was simple. You alright? That was it. No hidden meaning. No pressure. But somehow, it felt heavier than anything else he could have said. I shouldn't have replied. I knew that. Still. Yeah. Why? The response came quicker than I expected. You've been distant. I let out a slow breath, leaning back against my bed. Of course he noticed. Just busy. I typed. Even I was getting tired of that excuse. There was a pause this time. Long enough that I thought maybe that was the end of it. That's not it. I ran a hand over my face, exhaling quietly. He wasn't wrong. But admitting that felt like opening a door I wasn't ready to walk through. What do you want me to say? The truth. Like I said before. I stared at that message. Because the truth wasn't simple. The truth was that I couldn't stop thinking about him. That being around him felt right, even when it shouldn't. That I didn't regret what happened. Not really. And that scared me more than anything else. My fingers hovered over the screen for a second before I typed back. This is complicated. 3 dots appeared almost immediately. It is. That was it. No argument. No denial. Just agreement. And somehow, that made everything feel even more real. I swallowed, my chest tight. We shouldn't be texting. I added. This time, the response took longer. Long enough that I thought maybe I'd finally drawn a line that would hold. Probably not. A pause. Then another message. But you still replied? I let out a quiet, frustrated laugh under my breath. He had a point. And we both knew it. I set my phone down after that, staring up at the ceiling. Because no matter how much I tried to convince myself I had control over this, I didn't. Not completely. And the more I let it continue, even like this, the harder it was going to be to stop. I didn't realize how deep I was in until I tried to stop. Really stop. Not just avoid his house. Not just ignore messages. I mean actually cutting it off, mentally, emotionally, all of it. It lasted maybe a day. Because the truth was, it wasn't just about him anymore. It was about how I felt when I was around him. And I couldn't shake that. A couple nights after those texts, Lucas invited me over again. Said he was ordering food, wanted to hang out like we used to. Normal. Easy. I almost said no. Actually had the message typed out. Then I deleted it. Yeah, I'll come. I told myself it was for Lucas. That I could handle it. That I had enough control now to keep things where they should be. I was wrong. The second I walked in, I felt it. That same shift in the air. That same awareness. Lucas greeted me like nothing had changed, pulling me into some dumb story before I even had time to think. It helped at first. Grounded me. Until Emmanuel walked in. And just like that, everything snapped back. Our eyes met for maybe half a second. That was all it took. No smile. No obvious reaction. But there was something there. Recognition. The kind that doesn't go away just because you want it to. The night went on like before, normal on the surface, something else underneath. But this time, it felt heavier. Less like tension. More like something unresolved. At some point, Lucas got distracted again. Phone call, stepping outside, same pattern. And again. It was just us. I didn't even pretend to ignore it this time. I leaned back against the couch, exhaling slowly. This is getting ridiculous. Emmanuel didn't respond right away. He just walked a little closer, stopping a few feet in front of me like before. Yeah, he said finally. It is. I looked up at him. And we're still doing it anyway. Yeah. That honesty hit harder than anything else. No excuses. No pretending. Just the truth, sitting right there between us. I shook my head slightly, letting out a quiet breath. I don't even know what this is. He studied me for a moment. Then, more quietly. It's not nothing. That much, I already knew. That doesn't make it okay, I said. No, he agreed. It doesn't. Silence again. But it wasn't empty. It was full of everything we weren't saying. I stood up, needing to move, needing to break the weight of it. This is Lucas, I said more firmly now. He trusts me. He trusts you. I know. You're his dad. I know. Each answer came without hesitation. Like he'd already thought through all of it. That should have made it easier for me. It didn't. Then why does this feel like? I stopped myself. Like what? He asked. I hesitated. Then said it anyway. Like it actually matters. That was the first time I said it out loud. And once it was there, I couldn't take it back. Something in his expression shifted again. Not surprise. Something deeper. I was wondering when you'd say that, he said quietly. My chest tightened. So I'm not the only one. No. That one word settled everything. Because it meant this wasn't one-sided. Wasn't just me getting caught up in something I didn't understand. This was mutual. Real. And that made it infinitely more complicated. I ran a hand through my hair, pacing slightly now. This is messed up. It is. And we're still standing here. Yeah. I let out a quiet, almost disbelieving laugh. We're idiots. That actually made him smile, just slightly. Probably. Another pause. Then I stopped pacing. Looked at him again. Really looked. And this time, I didn't try to hide it. Didn't pretend I didn't feel what I felt. If this keeps going, I said slowly, it's not just going to be a mistake. He didn't interrupt. Didn't look away. It's going to mean something, I added. That was the turning point. Because now it wasn't about tension or moments or curiosity. It was about choice. About consequences. About whether we were willing to let this become something real. Or end it before it got there. Emmanuel held my gaze for a long second. Then he said quietly, I think it already does. And that? That was the moment I knew. There was no easy way out of this anymore. I didn't sleep that night. Not really. I just lay there, staring at the ceiling, replaying everything over and over like my brain was trying to force a different outcome. Like if I thought about it enough, I'd land on the right decision. But there wasn't a clean, right answer. There was just choice. And consequences. The next morning, I woke up already tired of thinking. So I stopped. Not completely, but enough to do something I hadn't done yet. I went back. Not because Lucas texted me. Not because I needed something. But because I knew I couldn't leave it where it was. Half finished. Half denied. That was worse than ending it. When I got there, Lucas wasn't home. Of course. At this point, it almost felt intentional. I stood at the door for a second before knocking anyway. Part of me hoped he wouldn't answer. But he did. Emmanuel opened the door, clearly not expecting me. There was a brief pause, just a second, but it said everything. Colin. Hey. Neither of us moved right away. Then he stepped aside, letting me in without a word. The house felt different. Or maybe it was just me. I didn't sit this time. Didn't pretend I was here for anything casual. I turned to face him as soon as the door closed. We need to decide what this is, I said. Straight to it. No avoiding. No softening it. He didn't seem surprised. If anything, he looked like he'd been expecting this. Yeah, he said quietly. Silence settled between us again, but this time, it wasn't uncertain. It was focused. I exhaled slowly, trying to keep my thoughts clear. Because I can't keep doing this halfway thing. Either we stop, or we don't. There it was. Simple. Brutal. Real. He nodded slightly, like he agreed with that. Stopping would be easier, he said. I let out a small, humorless laugh. Yeah. It would. Another pause. Then I added. But I don't think that's what I want. That was it. The truth I'd been avoiding finally said out loud. And once it was there, everything shifted. His expression didn't change much, but I could see it in his eyes. That same recognition. That same weight. You understand what that means, he said. It wasn't a question. I nodded. Yeah. Lucas. That was the center of it. The line we'd already blurred just by getting this far. This isn't just about us, he added. I know. And it's not something we can hide forever. I know. Each answer came easier now. Because I wasn't fighting it anymore. I was accepting it. All of it. The risk. The mess. The reality. I don't want to hurt him, I said, quieter this time. Neither do I. That part mattered. More than anything else. We stood there for a long moment, just letting that truth exist between us. Because this wasn't some fantasy. It had real weight. Real consequences. And we both knew it. So what are you saying? He asked finally. I held his gaze. And for once, I didn't hesitate. I'm saying I'm not walking away from this just because it's complicated. My heart was pounding again, but this time, I wasn't trying to calm it. I'm saying it already means something to me, I added. There was no taking that back. No softening it. Just honesty. And for a second, I thought maybe that would be the point where he pulled away. Chose the safer option. The smarter one. But he didn't. He stepped closer instead. Not rushed. Not careless. Just certain. That makes two of us, he said. And just like that, the decision was made. Not perfectly. Not without consequences. But real. We didn't pretend it was simple after that. We didn't pretend it would stay easy. But we stopped pretending it was nothing. And somehow, that felt more honest than anything else we could have done. I wish I could say everything worked out cleanly after that. It didn't. There were hard conversations. Boundaries we had to figure out. Moments where the weight of it all caught up to us in ways we couldn't ignore. And yeah, eventually, Lucas found out. That was the hardest part. Losing him, even temporarily, was something I'll never pretend didn't hurt. But time does something strange. It doesn't erase things. It just reshapes them. And months later, after everything settled, after all the anger and confusion, we started talking again. Not like before. But not like strangers either. Something in between. Something real. As for me and Emmanuel, we didn't rush it. Didn't pretend it was perfect. But we stayed. Chose it. Every complicated, messy part of it. And I don't regret that. Not even a little. Because for the first time in my life, I didn't run from something just because it was hard. I stayed. And it changed everything.